In the cold library of the Reed mansion where every hope had died alongside the doctor's verdict of permanently paralyzed, a small voice broke the silence. Sophia, 11 years old daughter of the Maid, stood before billionaire Jonathan and spoke words no one dared to say. "Sir, I can make your mother walk again." And the room held its breath. Jonathan Reed could command 1,000 employees with a single email. He could move markets with a phone call. He could build empires from nothing. But tonight, sitting in his mother's bedroom, watching her motionless body beneath white sheets, he was utterly powerless. Eleanor Reed lay silent. Her eyes stared at the ceiling, empty of the fire that once commanded every room she entered. 3 months ago, a massive stroke had stolen half her body. The left side arm-leg face frozen. Useless. The doctor said the damage was catastrophic. Dr. Kingsley, the nation's top neurologist, had delivered his verdict 2 weeks prior in this very room. Jonathan remembered every word. "Mr. Reed, I'm sorry. The neural pathways are severed. There is no hope of motor recovery. Your mother will never walk again. Never." That word echoed through the mansion like a funeral bell. Jonathan had tried everything. Experimental treatments. Specialists from Switzerland. Therapists from Germany. All of them looked at Eleanor's charts, performed their tests, and shook their heads with the same sad certainty. The Reed mansion, with its marble floors and crystal chandeliers, felt like a beautiful tomb. Staff moved through hallways, whispering. Even the light seemed dimmer. In the corner of the grand bedroom, Maria Lopez wiped down the nightstand for the 3rd time that hour. She'd been the Reed family's housekeeper for 12 years, and she'd never seen Mr. Jonathan like this, shoulders-hunched face, aged 10 years and 3 months. Behind Maria, her 11-year-old daughter Sophia sat cross-legged on the floor near the doorway, clutching an old leather notebook. Sophia wasn't supposed to be here. Maria had told her to wait in the kitchen, but the girl had a habit of appearing where she wasn't expected. Sophia watched everything with quiet intensity. While others saw a broken woman, Sophia saw something different. She'd been watching Mrs. Eleanor for 3 weeks now, studying her the way her grandmother Helena had taught her to study patience. Grandmother Helena. The legendary nurse who'd saved soldiers everyone else had given up on. Who'd brought mobility back to bodies that science had declared finished. Sophia carried her notebook everywhere, pages filled with Helena's handwritten notes, diagrams, observations about the human body's hidden language. Tonight, Sophia noticed something. When Mr. Jonathan's voice cracked with a sob, Mrs. Eleanor's right big toe twitched, just once, barely visible, but it was there. Sophia stood slowly, her heart hammered. Her mother would be furious. Mr. Reed might fire them both. But grandmother Helena's voice whispered in her memory, "When you see life that others miss, you have a duty to speak." Jonathan sat slumped beside his mother's bed, his head in his hands. He was crying something his board members would never believe possible. Sophia took 3 steps forward. Her shadow fell across the bed. "Mr. Reed." Jonathan looked up, startled. He wiped his eyes quickly. "Sophia, you shouldn't be, Sir." Her voice was small but steady. "I know how to help Mrs. Eleanor." The room went silent. Maria froze, cloth in hand, eyes wide with horror. Jonathan stared at this child standing before him, threadbare shoes, borrowed dress hands, clutching an old notebook like a shield. "What did you say?" Sophia swallowed hard. Every instinct screamed at her to run. But she thought of the toe, the twitch, the life everyone else had stopped looking for. "I can make your mother walk again." But before we continue, make sure you've subscribed to the channel and comment where you're watching from. Jonathan's face transformed from grief to fury in seconds. "Excuse me?" His voice cut through the room like ice. "You think you can help my mother? A child?" Maria dropped her cloth and rushed forward. "Mr. Reed, I'm so sorry. Sophia, come here right now." Her voice shook with panic. "Please forgive her, sir. She doesn't understand." "No, Mama." Sophia stood her ground even as her legs trembled. "I do understand." Jonathan rose to his feet, towering over the small girl. "Do you have any idea how insulting this is? I've flown in the best neurologists in the world. Specialists who've studied for decades. And you, a maid's daughter, think you know better. I don't know better than them, sir. Sophia's voice stayed calm, though tears pressed behind her eyes. But I know how to wake up what they're not seeing. What they're not seeing. Jonathan's laugh was bitter. They've done MRIs, CT scans, nerve conduction studies. Did they check her emotional reflexes? The question stopped him cold. Sophia opened her grandmother's notebook with shaking hands. My grandmother was Helena Reyes. She was a nurse in the war. She saved soldiers that doctors said would never move again. Not with medicines, not with surgeries, with something else. Maria reached for her daughter's arm. Sophia, please. But Jonathan raised his hand. Let her speak. Sophia's courage grew a fraction. She stepped closer to Eleanor's bedside. When you cried just now, sir, your mother's toe moved. Her right big toe. It twitched. That's impossible. The doctor said she can't move. But they're measuring the wrong things. Sophia opened the notebook to a worn page covered in her grandmother's handwriting. Grandma Helena called them sleeping muscles. Not dead. Sleeping. The brain still sends signals, but they're so quiet that machines can't hear them. Only people can. Jonathan stared at the child, then at his mother's motionless form. That's not how neurology works. It's how people work. Sophia's voice carried a conviction beyond her years. Your mother's muscles aren't destroyed, sir. They're waiting. The pathways aren't completely severed, they're blocked. Like a river with too many stones. The water is still trying to flow. She pointed to Eleanor's left hand. Watch her pinky finger when you say her name with emotion. Really say it like you did before. Jonathan felt ridiculous, but something in Sophia's eyes compelled him. He leaned close to his mother. Mom. His voice cracked. Mom, I'm here. Eleanor's pinky trembled. Barely a millimeter. But it moved. Jonathan gasped. How did you? Because I was looking for it. Sophia's eyes shone. The doctors looked at scans. I looked at her. Grandma Helena taught me the body remembers what the brain forgets. Your mother's muscles remember walking, remember holding you, remember dancing. Those memories are trapped, but they're not gone. Maria stood frozen, torn between pride and terror for her daughter's boldness. Jonathan sank into his chair, his certainty crumbling. And you think you can bring those memories back? I think I can teach her body to listen to them again. Sophia pulled out a second page from the notebook, a hand-drawn diagram of pressure points, heat therapy techniques, neural activation exercises. It won't be fast, it won't be easy. But Grandma did it 17 times. She kept records of all of them. She met Jonathan's eyes directly. I'm not asking you to believe me, sir. I'm asking you to let me try. Just once. If nothing happens, I'll never mention it again. The room held its breath. Outside, the grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 9 times. Jonathan looked at his mother. At this impossible child. At the notebook filled with faded hope. Every rational part of his mind screamed that this was absurd. That he was grasping at straws. That grief was making him consider the ridiculous. But that pinky finger had moved. 1 session. His voice was steel. 1. If I see nothing real, this conversation never happened. Understood. Sophia nodded, her heart soaring. Understood, sir. Maria closed her eyes and prayed. The next morning, Sophia arrived at Eleanor's room carrying items that made Jonathan question his decision: a jar of warm olive oil, heated towels wrapped in plastic, a wooden spoon, and her grandmother's notebook. This is what you need. Jonathan couldn't hide his skepticism. Oil and towels. And patience, sir. Sophia set everything on the bedside table with careful precision. Grandma Helena said fancy equipment makes doctors feel important, but healing happens through touch, warmth, and attention. She approached Eleanor slowly, speaking directly to the woman as if she could respond. Mrs. Eleanor, my name is Sophia. I'm Maria's daughter. I'm going to touch your left leg now. It might feel strange, but I promise I'll be gentle. Jonathan watched as Sophia dipped her fingers in the warm oil and began pressing them along his mother's calf. But this wasn't massage, it was something else entirely. Sophia would press a spot, then pause, her eyes closed, as if listening. "What are you doing?" Jonathan whispered. Listening to her muscles. Sophia's voice was distant, concentrated. "Grandma taught me muscles talk if you know how to hear them. When I press here, I feel the temperature, the tension, the tiny vibrations. Dead muscle feels like cold clay. Sleeping muscle feels like a hibernating bear. Still warm inside." She moved to Eleanor's knee, applying the heated towel, then pressing specific points around the joint. The heat wakes up the nerves, reminds them they're still connected. But Sophia did something unexpected. As she worked, she began to speak not to Jonathan but to Eleanor. "Mrs. Eleanor, do you remember the garden outside? Maria told me you used to walk there every morning. You had a favorite rose bush by the fountain, the yellow ones that bloomed in June." Jonathan's breath caught. That was true. His mother had loved those roses. Sophia continued, her hands moving in slow, deliberate patterns. "You'd walk the stone path in your blue robe. 23 steps from the door to the fountain. You'd count them every time. Maria said you told her it was your morning meditation." As Sophia spoke, her fingers traced the path down Eleanor's leg, mimicking the walking motion, the steps, the rhythm. "Your brain remembers those steps, Mrs. Eleanor. Your muscles remember. We just need to remind them it's safe to move again." Jonathan leaned forward. Was it his imagination, or was his mother's breathing changing? Sophia placed the wooden spoon in Eleanor's left hand, curling the fingers around it gently. This was Grandma's trick. She said holding something real, something with weight and texture, helps the brain reconnect to the hand. Your mind knows what holding feels like. It just forgot how to tell your fingers. For 10 minutes, nothing happened. Then Eleanor's thumb shifted, just slightly, but it pressed against the spoon. "Mom." Jonathan's voice was barely audible. Sophia's eyes opened. She'd felt it too. "Again, Mrs. Eleanor. You can do it again." Silence stretched. Jonathan held his breath. The thumb moved again, stronger this time. Deliberate. "Oh my God." Jonathan's hand flew to his mouth. Maria, watching from the doorway, began to cry silently. Sophia smiled but kept working. She moved back to Eleanor's leg, applying more warmth, more pressure, continuing her story about the garden, the roses, the morning walks. And then the moment that changed everything, Eleanor's toes curled. All 5 of them. Slowly, like someone stretching after a long sleep, they bent and released. Jonathan fell to his knees beside the bed. Mom, you're doing it." Sophia placed her small hand over Eleanor's. "This is just the awakening, Mrs. Eleanor. Just the beginning. Your body is remembering. It's finding its way back." Tears streamed down Jonathan's face as he watched his mother's fingers tighten around the spoon again, then release. Weak movements. Tiny victories. But movement nonetheless. Sophia stepped back, wiping oil from her hands. She looked at Jonathan with eyes far older than 11 years. "The doctors weren't wrong, sir. The damage is real. But they measured death when they should have been listening for sleep. Your mother isn't broken. She's just very, very tired. And tired things can wake up." Jonathan couldn't speak. He simply nodded, his entire worldview cracking open. In that quiet room with warm oil and heated towels and an old wooden spoon, hope returned. Dr. Kingsley arrived 3 days later for his scheduled follow-up, his leather briefcase gleaming his confidence absolute. He'd seen 1,000 cases like Eleanor Reed. The prognosis never changed. He stopped cold in the doorway. Sophia knelt beside Eleanor's bed, guiding the woman's left hand through slow, deliberate movements, open, close, rotate. Eleanor's fingers trembled with effort, but they were moving. "What is this?" Kingsley's voice cut through the room like a scalpel. Jonathan stood quickly. "Doctor, I can explain. This is a child performing unsupervised therapy on a stroke patient." Kingsley strode forward, his face reddening. "Mr. Reed, are you aware of the liability? The danger? This is absolutely—" Her toes moved yesterday. Jonathan's voice was quiet but firm. "Her fingers are responding. She held a cup this morning." Kingsley set down his briefcase with a sharp click. Mr. Reed, I understand you're desperate, but what you're witnessing is involuntary muscle spasms, random neural firing. Folk massage cannot reverse neurological damage. Sophia stood slowly still, holding Eleanor's hand. With respect, sir, I'm not trying to reverse damage. I'm trying to wake what's still alive. Kingsley's eyes narrowed on this child who dared challenge him. Young lady, I've spent 30 years studying the nervous system. I have degrees from Johns Hopkins and Cambridge, and you have, what, an old notebook and YouTube tutorials. I have something you don't have, sir. Sophia's voice didn't waver. I have time to watch. To watch. You spend 15 minutes with patients. You read scans. You check reflexes with a hammer. Sophia gestured to Eleanor. But did you check her emotional reflexes? Did you notice that her left eye tears up when Mr. Jonathan speaks about his childhood? Did you see that her breathing changes when someone mentions her garden? Kingsley's jaw tightened. Emotional responses are not motor function, but they prove the brain is still connecting. Sophia opened her grandmother's notebook to a diagram. You tested her reflexes here, here, and here. She pointed to standard reflex points. But did you test memory-activated response? Did you ask her to imagine walking while measuring muscle engagement? That's not standard protocol. Maybe it should be. Sophia's eyes blazed with a passion that made her seem much older. You said her neural pathways were severed, but look at her hand right now. Eleanor's fingers were slowly curling and uncurling around the wooden spoon. Kingsley stared. Those are spasms. Test her then. Sophia stepped back. Use your reflex hammer. But this time ask Mr. Jonathan to hold her hand first. Ask him to remind her of something important. Then test. Kingsley looked at Jonathan, who nodded. The doctor retrieved his reflex hammer, clearly intending to prove this child wrong once and for all. He positioned himself by Eleanor's left knee. Jonathan took his mother's right hand, leaning close. Mom, remember teaching me to ride a bike. You ran beside me for 3 whole blocks. You never let go until I was ready. Something shifted in Eleanor's eyes. A flicker of presence. Kingsley tapped the knee. Eleanor's leg jerked, not a twitch. A full reflex response. The hammer clattered to the floor. That's impossible, Kingsley whispered. 3 days ago that reflex was completely absent. Because 3 days ago no one was asking her brain to remember why moving mattered. Sophia's voice was gentle now, not triumphant. You're a brilliant doctor, sir, but you stopped looking when the machines said there was nothing there. Machines can't measure hope. They can't measure will. They can't measure a mother who wants to hug her son again. Kingsley stood frozen, his certainty crumbling. He'd built his career on evidence, on data, on scientific proof. But the evidence was moving its toes, right in front of him. Jonathan spoke quietly. Doctor, I'm not asking you to approve. I'm informing you that we're continuing Sophia's therapy. If you'd like to observe and document, you're welcome. But we're not stopping. Kingsley picked up his hammer slowly. He looked at Eleanor, at Sophia, at his own shaking hands. I'd like to stay, he said finally, his voice barely audible. I'd like to learn. Sophia smiled. Grandma's notebook has room for more names, sir. Maybe one day yours will be in it too. They became an unlikely team of 3. Every morning at 6, Sophia arrived at the mansion with her grandmother's notebook and a backpack full of simple tools. Every evening at 9, Jonathan would finish his business calls and join them. And between those hours, Eleanor fought her way back to life inch by painful inch. Dr. Kingsley came twice a week now, no longer to dismiss, but to document. He filled journals with observations that contradicted everything he'd learned, everything he'd taught. He watched a child accomplish what his profession had declared impossible. Day 3. Eleanor lifted her left hand 3 inches off the bed. Day 7. She spoke her first word in 4 months. John. Slurred, broken, but unmistakable. Jonathan wept. Day 10. Sophia brought 2 wooden chairs into the bedroom and positioned them 3 feet apart. "Today we stand," she announced. Maria gasped from the corner. "Sophia, that's too soon." But Eleanor's eyes burned with determination. After 10 days of waking, sleeping muscles, of remembering forgotten movements, she was ready to try. Jonathan supported his mother's right side. Sophia, tiny but steady, braced the left. Together they lifted Eleanor to her feet. She lasted 4 seconds before her legs buckled. They tried again. 6 seconds. Again. 8 seconds. By the end of that session, Eleanor stood for 23 seconds, the exact number of steps she used to take to her garden fountain. Sophia had known that number would matter. Each night after the physical work ended, Sophia would read from her grandmother's notebook. Not the technical pages, but the stories. Tales of soldiers who learned to walk again because they had someone waiting for them. Of a dancer who was told she'd never move but pirouetted at her daughter's wedding 3 years later. And Sophia would add her own words. "Grandma wrote that healing isn't just about fixing the body, Mrs. Eleanor. It's about remembering why the body wants to be fixed. You have to have a reason to stand, a place you want to walk to, a moment you want to reach." One evening, Jonathan asked the question that had been haunting him. "Sophia, why are you doing this? You could have stayed silent, stayed safe. Why risk everything for my mother?" Sophia looked up from the notebook, her young face serious. "Because Grandma Helena taught me that if you see someone trying to get up and you do nothing, you become part of what's holding them down. And I didn't want to be that person, sir." The simplicity of it broke something open in Jonathan's chest. Day 15. Eleanor took her first step. Her left foot dragged, her leg shook violently, and she would have fallen if Jonathan and Sophia hadn't been there. But she moved forward. 1 step. Then collapsed back into the wheelchair, sobbing with exhaustion and triumph. Sophia knelt beside her. "That's 1 step more than yesterday, Mrs. Eleanor. Tomorrow we'll try for 2. Day 18. 3 steps. Day 19. 5 steps. Day 20. Eleanor spoke a full sentence. "I want to walk to my garden." Sophia smiled through tears. "Then that's where we're going, Mrs. Eleanor. That's our finish line." Day 21 arrived with golden morning light streaming through the bedroom windows. Sophia brought something new today, a photograph of Eleanor's yellow rosebush in full bloom. "Remember why we're doing this," Sophia said softly, taping the photo to the wall exactly 12 feet from Eleanor's wheelchair. 12 steps, Mrs. Eleanor. 12 steps to your roses." They began. Jonathan and Sophia flanked Eleanor as she rose shakily to her feet. Her left leg trembled. Her left arm hung mostly useless, but her right side was strong and her will was stronger. 1 step. Her breath came in gasps. 2 steps. Sweat beaded on her forehead. 5 steps. Jonathan's hands shook, supporting her weight. 8 steps. Sophia whispered encouragement like prayers. 11 steps. Eleanor's eyes locked on the photograph. 12. Eleanor's hand touched the wall where the roses bloomed in the picture. She stood there breathing hard, tears streaming down her face. "I did it," she whispered. "Helena, I did it." Sophia pressed her face against Eleanor's side and cried, not for what was lost, but for what had been found again. Jonathan held them both, his empire forgotten, his wealth meaningless. In this moment, he was simply a son watching his mother stand. And it was everything. The annual Reed Foundation Gala was 3 days away. 500 guests, the city's elite, photographers from every major publication. Jonathan had attended every year for 2 decades, always with his mother at his side. This year, everyone expected an empty seat. Jonathan sat at Eleanor's bedside the morning after her 12 steps. "Mom, the gala is Friday. I'll stay home with you. We can watch a movie, spend the evening." Eleanor's hand gripped his with surprising strength. Her speech was still labored, but her words were clear. "No. I go." Jonathan's heart sank. "Mom, the wheelchair. The crowds, the cameras. No wheelchair." Eleanor's eyes blazed with the fire he remembered from childhood. "I walk." Sophia, changing the water pitcher nearby, turned slowly. Mrs. Eleanor, 12 steps is amazing, but the gala entrance is at least 40 steps from the car to the speaking platform. Then we practice 40 steps. Eleanor's jaw set with stubborn determination. Maria touched her daughter's shoulder. Sophia, that's only 3 days. Grandma Helena rehabilitated a pilot in 6 days once. Sophia pulled out the notebook, flipping to a worn page. He had to walk at his daughter's wedding. She wrote that miracles don't wait for convenient timing. They happen when someone refuses to accept anything less. She looked at Eleanor with understanding. You want to walk into that gala, don't you, Mrs. Eleanor? You want everyone who's been whispering about you to see that Eleanor Reed isn't finished. Eleanor nodded, tears streaming. I want to stand at that podium and thank the people who never gave up on me. For 3 days they trained like soldiers preparing for battle. 40 steps became their mantra. They practiced in the hallway, in the garden, on the marble floors. Eleanor fell twice. Her leg gave out 4 times. But each time she demanded they start again. Dr. Kingsley came to observe on the 2nd day. He no longer offered warnings, only quiet encouragement and medical supervision. The scientist in him was documenting a case study that would rewrite textbooks. The human in him was simply witnessing something beautiful. Friday arrived with crystalline winter air and camera flashes. The Reed Foundation Gala glittered with diamonds and ambition. Guests sipped champagne and whispered about Eleanor's absence. Some had heard rumors of improvement. Most assumed Jonathan would make a brief speech about his mother's condition, and nothing more. Sophia stood with her mother in the staff section near the kitchen, wearing a borrowed dress that Maria had pressed 3 times. She clutched her grandmother's notebook like a talisman. You should be up there with them, Maria whispered. You're the reason she's no mama. Sophia squeezed her mother's hand. I'm just the person who reminded her she could. Mrs. Eleanor is the one who chose to fight. The ballroom hushed as the evening's program began. Jonathan approached the microphone, elegant in his tuxedo, his face unreadable. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. This foundation was built on my mother's belief that hope is not a luxury, it's a necessity. And tonight I'd like to invite someone to help me explain what that truly means. He gestured toward the entrance. The crowd murmured, confused. Then the doors opened. Eleanor Reed stood in the doorway, supported by 2 discreet assistants wearing a midnight blue gown that shimmered under the chandeliers. Her left side was weaker, yes. Her gait would never be perfect. But she was standing. The ballroom erupted in gasps. Cameras exploded with flashes. Someone whispered, Is that really? It's her. She's standing. How is this possible? Eleanor took her first step. The room fell into absolute silence. 500 people holding their breath as one. 1 step, 2, 3. Jonathan walked beside her, ready to catch her, but far enough back to let the world see this was Eleanor's moment. 10 steps, 20, 30. Someone began to clap, then another. Then the entire ballroom rose to its feet in thunderous applause. Tears streamed down Eleanor's face as she reached the steps to the platform. Jonathan offered his arm for the final climb. Together, they ascended. At the microphone, Eleanor gripped the podium with both hands. Her voice trembled, but carried across the room with crystalline clarity. 3 months ago, I was told I would never walk again. And I believed it. Until an 11-year-old girl refused to believe what everyone else accepted as truth. She paused, scanning the crowd until her eyes found Sophia half hidden behind a pillar. Sophia Lopez taught me that paralysis isn't just physical. It's believing that where you are is where you'll always be. Tonight I stand here because someone saw possibility, when the world saw only limitation. The applause shook the chandeliers. Sophia pressed her face against her mother's shoulder and cried. In the back of the ballroom, Dr. Kingsley wiped his eyes and began rewriting his lecture notes in his mind. The morning after the gala, Sophia arrived at the mansion to find Jonathan waiting in the library. Eleanor sat in her favorite chair by the window, not a wheelchair, but the velvet armchair she'd used before the stroke, watching her yellow roses bloom in the garden below. Sophia. Jonathan stood, his usual commanding presence softened by something deeper. We need to talk. Sophia's heart skipped. Had she done something wrong? Was this where everything ended? Sit, please. He gestured to the sofa. Sophia perched on the edge, her grandmother's notebook clutched tight. Jonathan sat across from her, his hands folded. Sophia, you gave my mother her life back. How do I repay that? A bonus for your mother? A college fund? I don't want money, sir. Sophia's voice was quiet but firm. Jonathan blinked clearly, not expecting this. Then what do you want? Sophia looked at her mother, who'd entered silently to stand near the door, then back at Jonathan. I want my mama to be treated with respect. Real respect. Not just as the woman who cleans, but as someone who matters. Someone whose opinion is valued. Jonathan's throat tightened. And I want to study rehabilitation therapy. I want to learn everything Grandma Helena knew, and everything she didn't know. I want to help people like Mrs. Eleanor, people the doctors give up on. Eleanor spoke from her chair, her words still slow but clear. Then you shall have both, child. Jonathan nodded. Effective immediately, Maria is promoted to household manager with full benefits and decision-making authority. And Sophia, you have a full scholarship, high school, university, medical school if you want it. The Reed Foundation will cover everything. Maria's hand flew to her mouth, tears spilling over. But Sophia shook her head. Not just me, sir. There are other kids like me. Kids whose grandmothers and mothers know things that textbooks don't teach. Can the scholarship be for all of them kids who want to heal people but can't afford the education? Jonathan stared at this 11-year-old girl who'd just turned down a personal fortune to help strangers. The Helena Reyes Scholarship Fund, he said softly. For students pursuing rehabilitation and holistic healing. We'll launch it next month. Sophia's smile could have lit the entire mansion. Eleanor rose slowly from her chair and crossed the room. It took her 23 steps, one for each morning she used to walk to her fountain. She reached Sophia and pulled the girl into her arms. You gave me more than movement, child. You gave me purpose again. You reminded me that being broken doesn't mean being finished. Sophia hugged her back fiercely. You were never broken, Mrs. Eleanor. You were just resting. Grandma used to say that rest looks like giving up, but they're completely different things. Eleanor held Sophia at arm's length, looking into eyes far too wise for their years. Your grandmother would be so proud of you. Sophia opened the worn leather notebook one final time. On the last page beneath her grandmother's final entry from 20 years ago, she pulled out a pen. In careful handwriting, she wrote, Today, another person stood up. Not just with her legs, but with her heart. Grandma, I understand now what you meant. Healing isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about believing that broken things can still grow. Sophia Lopez, age 11. She closed the notebook gently. Jonathan stood beside them, this unlikely trio who defied medicine and logic and impossibility. What will you do now, Sophia? After all this? Sophia looked out the window at the garden, at the yellow roses Eleanor would soon walk to again without help. At the world full of people who'd been told never and believed it. I'm going to find more people to wake up, sir. Her voice was steady, certain. Because Grandma left me this notebook with empty pages at the end. And I think I know why now. Eleanor smiled. Why, dear? Because she knew the stories weren't finished. They were just waiting for someone else to write the next chapters. Outside, morning light touched the roses, and somewhere in the mansion, a woman who was told she'd never walk again, took her first independent steps toward the garden she loved. The miracle wasn't finished. It was only beginning. This story ends here. Thank you for taking the time to listen. While this is a fictional story created to convey emotion, I hope you found something meaningful in it. If you'd like to continue hearing more stories like this, check out other videos right here on the Maid's Daughter Stories channel, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Your presence truly matters to this channel. See you in the next video.